Recording.
I'm just going to turn off my phone.
Great. We're live. It's the pre-party session for the awesome webinar from Lena and Lisette. We are going to talk about your setup to work virtually. Now what? So now I'm going to broadcast live. Here we go.
Perfect.
I think we're broadcasting. Great. So welcome everybody to our live webinar. My name is Lisette Sutherland. I am joined by
Morkbak.
I am right now in Stockholm, Sweden. This is not my apartment. For those of you who've seen my background, I do not have deer heads on my wall normally. And Lena, you are in?
I'm in Portland, Oregon, in my new house. I just moved last week.
Great. And so the webinar today that we wanted to present to everybody is your setup to work virtually. Now what? So we welcome you. This is not going to be necessarily interactive like we normally do our workshops. Our online workshops are very interactive. We do exercises, we pair up, we do breakout rooms. Today is more of a webinar. We just want to do a 30-minute, fast-paced, shower you with a bunch of tips and tricks for working virtually in hopes that at the end you'll want to join one of our interactive online workshops because they are a lot of fun and tons of information. So today is just a teaser.
It's just a teaser. And I can see that we have about 9 participants joining us right now, so welcome. We have several people being signed up. We're starting right at the top of the hour. So for those of you who just joined us, welcome. You should be able to see myself, Lena Morkbak, as well as my colleague Lisette here on our video. As Lisette just mentioned, normally in a virtual learning environment, we would have it be more engaging in terms of setting up in smaller breakout rooms. Today, we're going to be traditional webinar style for 30 minutes. And if you have any questions, please use the chat and we will try and monitor that during our half hour here together. We will also be able to linger afterwards. So if there's any Q&A, please stay after the half an hour and Lisette and I will be happy to share anything additional and also answer any questions you have. So as Lisette was saying, she's in Stockholm today, in Sweden. But Lisette, where are you originally from?
Originally, well, that's a tough question to answer. Born in Germany, lived there, and then moved to the US, and then now I live in the Netherlands.
Yes.
So.
And I am originally Danish and now living in Portland, Oregon on the west coast of the US. So we collaborate around virtual collaboration workshops. It's Lisette's little brainchild, collaboration Superpowers. I'm one of the facilitators who are also facilitating part of her material. The material is very liberal, which means that some of my personal experiences around global teams and also intercultural theory I put into my context of the workshops that I present, and that's the freedom Lisette has been putting forward with all the different people who are certified in this material. So we want to share a little bit about what does it mean when you are set up to work virtually. So then now what? What is needed to do the next step? So let me just ask by this little questions here. And ask you, and please feel free to use the chat here. When team members are in different physical locations, guess what? Sometimes the collaboration becomes more challenging and more difficult. At what distance do you think that it starts becoming a negative impact? So please use the chat here. And if you haven't found the chat, it's down the bottom, a little bubble where it says chat. Click that and then use and write in the chat here.
So I have my strong opinions, of course, of where, while we're waiting for people to enter things into the chat, I always think, you know, if you're not in the same room together, there's some sort of difficulty. You're some form of remote. Yeah, Stephanie says anything that's not face-to-face. Agreed.
Exactly, right.
And Rick, more than 100 meters?
Stephanie, I can see. Okay, basically out of sight, out of mind. I like that too. Warwick, that's true. There's something about, even if I have like the back to me and you are in an open environment, but you're sitting to the back to me, maybe already there's going to be an impact. So research is actually showing that it's 30 meters. So as what Rick was saying, at least not more than 100 feet. So 30 meters equivalent to 100 feet. that's when it started becoming an issue when we are collaborating together. So over time, do you think team members cooperate more or less with colleagues who are more distant? And why or why not? Again, use the chat here. We're just kind of picking your brain on what's your experience, what's your thoughts around collaboration here.
And then we will shower you with tips. So don't worry, we won't ask questions the whole time. The tips are coming. We just want to get some feel for what people are thinking.
Exactly. So let's see, what are some of those ideas that people have here? Please use the chat. Lisette, I'm sure you have a comment to this.
Yeah, indeed. I've actually heard from teams in my workshops that it's after 2 to 3 months of not seeing each other face to face, it starts to become, you start to lose touch. So Jean, he or she said, remote team members have to work harder to stay psychologically part of the team. Absolutely correct. And Stephanie, collaboration takes more effort when not in person. Absolutely correct. But we're hoping to show you today that maybe it will take more effort, but it's also more worth it because the results can be bigger. So.
And I actually like what you were saying here, Warren, that my struggle is to get my team to ask each other instead of coming to me. And I think that's a very point in here. Instead of having one-way communication to like a team lead or to a manager or someone who sits with certain information around a topic, that it becomes the collaboration. It becomes collaboration of a team like we would have and we know the benefits of when we're in a face-to-face space. So very good and important employment to have on there as well. And then I can see that Jean is also saying, I find that the period of time that we can be apart before the relationship degrades varies from context to context. Very good point here, Jean. And welcome to you as well. I can see I have several Portland network colleagues joining, so I'm glad to see you here. So let's move a little bit forward, because what does it mean to be present when we're in the virtual space? How are we able to be present with each other? Because presence is what's important for us. One of the elements that's important to make sure that we can leverage a higher level of collaboration as well as engagements with our colleagues when we're not in the same space together. So there's different things that we can use. So one tool that Lisette and we love, and we invited you here today into Zoom. So as soon as we have a platform where we can share screen, we can share video, and we can share voice, we can chat, we can work in a document together. That's one of those elements that can give us more presence with each other because we have a sense of each other. As soon as we have the visual part here as well, video is really a key. Some people are still hesitant and feel that there's a barrier. A lot of introverts feeling like, oh, one of the reasons that I actually like to work more virtual is that I don't have to be so present in the office all the time. But if I have to turn on my video, that can be fatiguing. So we still have to know how to juggle and that we're not in meetings constantly, but that when we do plug into meetings, that we be as present as possible. There are some other technologies that you can share with us, Lisette.
Yeah, I would love to. So one thing, before I talk about info presence, I want to show this technology here. People will be able to see it on the screen. You can see it's a little bit grainy. This is called Personify. It's basically a 3D camera that sits on the top of my laptop and projects me onto anything that I'm showing on my screen. So as within a webinar, I really think I'm such a fan of video. I find it so important that I actually, no matter what I'm doing with presentation, I always use Personify. Even though it's a bit grainy, you can see it's a bit choppy, it's not actually perfect, but the technology is only getting better from here. So what you're looking at on the screen here, besides my awesome Personify technology here with this 3D camera, this is a system called Info Presence, and it can start to get, video with Zoom is one of the very basic video components, but we can get as complicated as we want to get or as expensive as we want to get. A system like this is, it's going to start costing money, but if you want to simulate sitting across the table from each other, this is an absolutely great system. You can see here what is possible with this kind of technology. Another one of my very favorite tools is a tool called Sococo. That's S-O-C-O-C-O. I think my image here is covering up the name. If I just move aside, you can see it there on the bottom right. So Sococo, this is a virtual office. So Basically, indeed, it is awesome. What we're looking into is we're looking into a floor plan of an office. Each one of these squares represents a different office. And each one of these dots here is an avatar. That's a person that's in that office. And we can only see and hear the people that are in the same office with us. So the four of us here, you can see that we've got our videos on. The four of us are down at the bottom in this lounge area. We can only see and hear each other that are in the lounge area. But if I want to go and talk to Henry in Henry's office, I can just double click on his office. My avatar goes there, and I can go and talk to Henry and whoever else is in his office with him. So this is another form of being present while we're remote. And this visual aspect is so important to be able to see where our colleagues are and who they're talking to throughout the day.
One of the things that I really like about Sukoko is also that I use it when I do learning session virtually. So I use it as part of the sessions format, not all sessions, but 1 or 2 sessions. I will host them in Sukoko, which means that I can do breakout rooms when saying, oh, why don't you go over to the billiard room and have a discussion, those 4 of you? And why don't you 3 go over in the comic book area and you have a discussion around that? So you can use it. We can, you know, here in Zoom, we can have people break up in breakout rooms, but there's something when there is a physical layout and people can click and go into a room. You can also post topics and say, whoever's interested in that topic, it's almost like an open conference style, go and talk in this room. So there's something both for teams, but also in terms of when you're facilitating and engaging dialogue with a larger group of people, that you can have them take charge instead of you are the one who's facilitating.
Indeed. And we have a virtual co-working group, if anybody is interested, where we actually meet every week, every day. In fact, people from around the world, we meet in a virtual office, Sukoko, and we just work together as individual people. And what's nice is you can be working from home. A lot of people feel isolated when they work from home or when they're working from anywhere. But with my virtual co-working group, no matter where I am, I'm still working with other people. So that's one of the tools that I really like to highlight, because it just shows the importance of being visual while we're online. It's a different form of presence. Now, those who know me and those who know the workshop and Collaboration Superpowers know that we are a big fan of the telepresence robots. So this is another technology that I think is just awesome. On the left-hand side of the screen, you're going to see a Kubi, and the Kubi is basically Skype. You can just beam in, or just like on Skype, but the difference is that as the participant, you can move yourself from left to right. So you can actually sit at the table with other people who are in person and be present in the room. And what's nice is it's better than just beaming in on a laptop on Skype, because you have movement, and that movement gives you more of a human presence in the room. So it kind of humanizes the person, which is fun. Now, what you're seeing here on the right, this is the Beam Pro by Suitable Technologies. It's a drivable robot. So you beam in, just like Skype, and you use the arrow keys on your keyboard to drive yourself around. Now, what you're seeing in the orange beam is my friend Kristen, who lives in Canada, and myself living in the Netherlands. We've beamed into a conference in Las Vegas together, and we spent the day there together. We went to talks, we had virtual tea together, we visited some booths, talked to people, and spent the day in Vegas together from the comforts of our living room. Now, the only question that's still left to answer is, what happens in a robot in Vegas? Does it stay in Vegas, or what? We haven't really gone there yet. So that's still to be answered, so stay tuned. But these forms of telepresence are just the beginning, and the holograms are really just around the corner. By the end of the year, we'll really be talking about holograms in case. But these forms humanize us more in the workplace and give us more of a presence. So depending on the need, these tools can be handy, but I do like to show them off. One of the ways that telepresence is really handy is, say, for instance, that you want to be at home, but because you have a package waiting, or the plumber's coming, or your kids are sick, one of those reasons, but you still need to be at the office. So you can place your Kubi in your office and work from home, and essentially be in 2 places at once. So people can just come, sit in the office, visit you as if you were there in person. Quite exciting. So this technology is really great. A lot has happened. Now let's talk about mindset a bit.
That was a little teaser of some of the things that we collaborate on and work on in the workshops, in terms of how can you create that presence here are some tips with technology. But it's not only a presence. I think some things that's really key in terms of where we're at in our workplaces, in terms of incorporating good collaboration with our distant colleagues and dispersed colleagues, is a little bit of a change of a mindset. Because I think we have a tendency, unfortunately, on the other hand, I think it's also very human, that we take the current practices we have and we import them into our virtual space. So the way that we run meetings, for example, in a face-to-face space, we're saying, oh, well, it's the same way we should be running meetings in a virtual space. Well, that's not actually the best engaging and fruitful way to have meetings in the virtual space. So there's something of a mindset that we need to do as well, because the mindset is typically what helps us change some of our behaviors, come up with new practices in terms of how we want to be present and how we want to collaborate in this space. So I just want to show you a quick little some data from a MIT study. This was presented at the Harvard Business Review back in 2012, but there was an MIT study where they looked at high-performing teams, and they were looking at, well, what are some of the patterns that are significant for teams that have high performance, and what they could see was that in terms of communication just happening, there was a very intense way of doing communication, and there was a pattern of how these teams were communicating. They could also see that when they have teams that were most productive, it was actually not the communication that happened within the formal meetings, things that were set up. It was a lot of the engagements that happened in social interactions that was happening, as Lisette was just mentioning before, people who were engaging in a Sococo work environment, for example, when they were meeting for coffee hours that was open slot and people would just stop in, but they were virtual. So it's not just in the things that we put on the calendar, it's a lot, of course, of what of the engagement and energy that happens outside our formal meetings. I think we do know that, but especially when we start working virtually, that's a component that gets lost. And of course, what they were seeing was that what they call far-flung teams, so teams that have the biggest time distance and also some of the biggest complexity in terms of national culture in them, they had the most highest difficulties creating those patterns of communication. So it was even more needed to be aware of what do we do when we're having these massive time differences in terms of each other. So the key here is that we need to go back and look at, well, what kind of culture do we have? And by culture, you want to move the slide, Lisette?
Yeah, sorry, something's weird is happening, and there we go.
And there we are, good. So if we're just assuming, oh, this is how we should collaborate together, sometimes that's where we get stuck. If we take a step back and say, well, let's not define the culture with any of our assumptions. Let's instead say, let's define this culture together. Let's have a dialogue as a team and find out what is the behavior we want to see and call normal, if you may. What is the kind of behavior? How frequent do we want to have feedback? How frequent do we want to, and how we want our feedback to come? How frequent do we want to meet? What formats do we want to meet? How do we want to create team building as a team when we are dispersed? So really taking a step back and saying, how do we want to communicate? How do we want to define that? It's in these kind of agreements that the glue between people really gets created. That's what creates and make that team gel together and stick together literally with the glue. Some of the things that we're using in the workshops, both the face-to-face workshops as well as the virtual workshops, is a team agreement. So if we have intact teams, we guide them through how to go through this of the ICC, like the information, communication, and collaboration, having reflections around, let's not just have a given on terms of how information is shared. Let's not have it be a given of how we're communicating, but have discussions around this. If we have workshops where people are from different kind of teams and different organizations, we still have to reflect back on how can this be a useful tool when you go back to your own team. If you're a team lead, how can you incorporate, tweak our agreement here maybe to make it fit what you have in front of you as well. So this is part of making the communication more predictable, but also making sure that we're actually discussing how do we want to share information, because that's how we're ending up doing the collaboration as well. Another thing around how to share what's going on is a method that's called working out loud. So this is a book by John Steffer. It's a fairly quick read in many ways, but and it's not rocket science as such, but it can be a fantastic way to just take a step back and say, how can I be processing what I'm doing so that it's obvious to other people around me, because they're not sitting next door. They're not picking up on the meeting I just had, or they didn't just stop by my laptop like, oh, are you making that presentation for our meeting next week? How interesting. I didn't know that you were the ones in charge. So we need to share a lot more deliberate where we're at, and that's called working out loud. You can see here is a quick screen, a quick list of how can working out loud, what can it look like. So that's just some of those tips. Of course, in our workshop, we go deeper into what does that mean if we want to do pair programming or teamwork sessions. What does it mean when you start using tools like Daily Stands Up or I've Done This, or these different apps and different tools. But the concept is here is, again, the mindset of taking a step back and figuring out how can I make it visible, so I'm tuned into what my colleagues are doing, they're tuned into what I'm doing. What happens really frequently when we're working virtually is that we get into our tunnel vision because there's no distractions. We can work ourselves to to the finish line of our most recent coffee cup. We can keep going, but that's not collaboration. That's not when we're most productive with our colleagues or even with ourselves. So that's this little piece around the mindset.
So Lena, we're having some people in the chat saying that they're having trouble with your sound, actually. So I'm not sure if you have a headset. I can hear you loud and clear, but I've got you close to my ear. So maybe for the last 9 minutes, you can put in your headset and we'll see if that helps. Thanks, everybody, for doing that. It's probably now going to be better.
Just, I hope this is better. I'm sorry. As I was talking, I wasn't the one who was following the chat.
I understand, yeah, and I didn't want to interrupt because you were in flow. But we can talk about now. Yay, hopefully it's better. Okay, so for the last 8 minutes, thanks for bearing with us. We experimented, it sounded fine to me. For the last 8 minutes, we'll go and we'll be talking about how businesses are changing, of course, with this new way of work. So we've talked about what it means to be present. We've given you a few tasters. What the mindset is that we need to have when we're working remote, which is results-oriented and working out loud so that we know what each other are working on. And Jean is asking what kind of headset I have. I have a Logitech H600. It's a wireless USB, awesome headset, highly recommended. They're only like 50 euros or something. So, but Lena, how about you go into this?
Well, when we start talking about a change of mindset, it's also that we're going from one time of looking at being time-oriented in terms of being more result-oriented. So it really comes down to what a lot of us as knowledge workers know and get engaged around, and that's the people that gets hired into our organization, is that work is not a place anymore. It is something that we do, and it's also something often that we're having a harder time turning on and off because it's engaging and it's because it's more fluid. So that also means that it's result oriented. We're not working in terms of that time slot, we're working in terms of that result. And it's linked to what I mentioned before in terms of us being, that the virtual component means that we can work 24/7, but it's important that we're still doing the collaboration. That's also when we get that in check, because the results, of course, are constantly, right?
Well, and what I like about going from time-oriented to results-oriented is that when we're time-oriented, we're paid for being there, and it's not very motivating necessarily to get the work done faster. So if we could get the work done in 2 hours rather than 8 hours, we should be rewarded for that. So when we go to results-oriented working, we are then rewarded for the results that we produce, and that's a really important mindset switch when we go to remote. So let me go to the next slide. I have to click on it. So the reason why most people go remote is freedom. Everybody loves freedom. Oh, and I want to turn on my Personify camera again. I hid it while I wasn't talking because I didn't want to, whoa, I didn't want to steal the thunder from Lena. But the reason why most people go remote is some sort of freedom. We want the freedom to create our own schedules. We want the freedom to, the freedom from the commute. Actually, in the over 100 interviews that I did, most people said that they wanted to go remote just to avoid the commute, because who wants to sit in traffic, of course. But it's the freedom to work on the projects that we want to work on and with the people that we want to work on. So most people go remote for the freedom. And as we know, for businesses, adding flexibility to businesses also contributes to employee happiness. And for businesses to actually retain and attract new talent, we want to be able to offer them work-life balance and work-life freedom. So indeed, oh, Lena, you wrote that, the freedom for the organizations to hire the best talent as well. Exactly. So regardless, we're no longer limited to the people in the town that we live in. We are now a global it can be a global organization. And when we get remote working right, we can do great things together. So this is one of the stories that I want to tell people. When they always ask, yeah, I'm really skeptical about remote working, I don't know if it can work, I always point to this example, which is one of my favorite examples. This is a story about a team called R-Loop who met in Reddit, which I'm not sure if people know what Reddit is, but it's a giant internet forum. So if you want to go and talk about cats, there's people talking about cats. If you want to go and talk about space, if you want to talk about food or running, there are groups for everything. It's one of the most popular websites in the world. It's like top number 6 or 9 on the list or something. So this group met in a subforum of Reddit, and it was called R-Loop, and one guy posted, hey, I would like to compete in the SpaceX Hyperloop competition, which is a transportation system that can take you from San Francisco to Los Angeles in 30 minutes. It basically shoots a pod through a gravity tube and like super fast gets you there in 30 minutes. And Elon Musk put out a competition for people to actually build and design this Hyperloop. So R-Loop got together. It's a group of global people, volunteers, all self-organized, who ended up as one of the top 6 finalists in the Hyperloop competition, have never met in person, did it all remote. There's no boss, there's no leader, completely self-organized team. So my answer to people is, can we work remote, is yes. If you want to work remote, it is absolutely possible. The technology in the past has been very painful, but it is no longer painful anymore, and it's getting better every single day. But it does take intention, and it does take people being deliberate about making it work. So yes, it's slightly more work, but what we can do when we make it work is awesome. So I mean, think of the things that we could do if we get the right people working together on things. So we wanted to end with some pro tips. I know we just have a few minutes left, so we wanted to end with some pro tips. Like if you're going to just do a couple of things, if you're going to work remotely, this is what you should do.
So I think one thing is definitely to make sure that you have the right equipment. Sometimes it can be silly to be saying that, but if I'm going out, I live in Oregon, if I'm going out in the rain, guess what? When I moved here, I invested in a good rain jacket and some good rain boots because it's the equipment I need in these surroundings. So I think sometimes our organizations and also ourselves, we're a little too late to be like, oh yeah, there's a free tool out there and maybe I can just do it like this. And it's not that the free tools isn't always some of the best on the line, but research what's the best equipment. Make sure that you have a great headset. Make sure that you have professional lighting. Let's sure that you're just taking a couple of some awareness around getting set up so that you're not doomed. So that's kind of can be simple, but sometimes it's a basic step that people and also organizations are not investing in.
You know, I have to say, sorry to interrupt, Lena,
yeah.
but I have given my this workshop, the Work Together Any workshop, in so many locations now with so many companies, global companies. I'm not going to name names, but when I see the equipment that they're using and I see the internet connectivity that they have, it's pretty bad. So a decent headset costs 50 euros. A decent webcam is also not that expensive. And the productivity, the amount of money that you save with the productivity of your employees is well worth the investment into very simple tips like this. You don't have to get fancy like with Personify. You don't have to buy the robots, but you definitely need the basics to be good or you are doomed. Otherwise, it's just hard. So Stephanie asked, are there issues with connectivity and bandwidth with different locations globally with some of these products? Yes, there are. I mean, if you go to Vietnam or if you go to Argentina, the internet connectivity is not great, and they are struggling with working globally because of that. Because if your communications are going to be painful with your team, then you're not going to want to do it, and that's death on a remote team. You want to do everything you can, and I think that's even the next tip, to make communication easy. You want to be able to just lean over and say, hey Bob, how's that marketing report? You don't want to have to schedule a meeting with your team and then sit down and wait till next week to do it. You want to push a button, talk to your team, and get going.
Exactly. So I think that's part of that other thing. And then I think it can be basic here also, but turn the video on. And some of us have a little bit of hesitation about doing that. What I've seen in teams is by modeling the behavior, you'll see more and more people in the team popping up on video. And I would say sometimes this is also part of what we're focusing on the workshop, like, well, how can you make the engagement in those virtual meetings? What are the little tricks? So it's both in terms of turning the video on, but it's also in terms of how to facilitate and use this space. What are icebreakers you can use? What are techniques you can use to make sure you're rotating facilitators? This is also very much in terms of how do different styles come into it. Can we facilitate meetings that's also honoring different work styles from different parts of the globe? And so that's part of that as well. So then also around feedback, there's also a good tip here.
Indeed, and I know we're running a little bit over time, but I just want to, well, it's just a couple more tips, so we'll just go a couple minutes over, of course. And I wanted to talk about feedback because feedback on a team, on a remote team especially, is critical. And if you're going to just do annual feedback, then that's not enough for a remote team. Remote team has to be continuous, it has to be coming from everybody, and it has to be just from the peers, not just from the managers, because you want to get feedback from everywhere. So what this graphic is showing is actually the system from Jürgen Appelo called Merit Money, which means, and the way that we use it on one of the teams that I work on is every month everybody gets 100 points, and you don't have to, but you give your points away during the month to your remote colleagues. And so to say, Patrick, whom I work with, who's just entered a question, and I'll say, Patrick, you get 20 points because you're so awesome and so supportive, and I really enjoy having you as a teammate. And Sergey, you get 30 points because you're a great coder. You can give them 20 points to Jürgen for making me laugh. But what this does is it shows what your teammates appreciate about you, and it gives you feedback on a continuous basis. So if you just look up Jürgen Appelo Merit Money, you'll find out more information about this system. But I just wanted to highlight that this top-down feedback system that we've been using in the past, it should be a thing of the past. It didn't work to begin with, and this kind of a system, it doesn't have to be merit money necessarily, but some sort of continuous peer-to-peer feedback on a remote team is going to be especially important. So really the basic, and what we've been saying this whole time, is a lot has happened in the last 5 years. It's time to take another look at the technologies that are out there. That spider phone that we've been leaning over on the conference room table of, hey Lena, it's Lisette, can you hear me now? That is a thing of the past. Chuck it in the river, and it's time to actually upgrade the equipment and do something real. Because if we want our employees to work remotely, we need to actually enable them to work remotely, because we can't just send them off and say, okay, go work remotely and be just as productive as you were at the office, but don't use any of the equipment and don't turn your cameras on. Not going to work. So that's what we're saying. So if you'd like to learn more, we hope that this has been enough of a teaser that you'd like to learn more. There are several Work Together Anywhere workshops coming up. It's at collaborationsuperpowers.com/events. There's a whole bunch, a lot of them online, some of them in person. Lena and I are going to be doing an in-person workshop together in Utrecht in the Netherlands on March 29th. We hope that anybody that is near there will join us. So in person, super fun. We'll still be using all of the tools. You'll still get to drive the robots while you're there. Lena is going to be giving a face-to-face workshop in Portland, Oregon in April, and there are 2 online workshops that we're each giving in March. So we hope that you will definitely join us for that. And one more thing before you go, we want to offer a gift, which is, you've probably seen us holding up these awesome cards. And these are virtual meeting cards. I call them super cards. and they're used for online video meetings. And I've got a free sampler pack that you can download and print for yourself. I put the 8 most popular supercards on the website at collaborationsuperpowers.com/gift. You can download your own and print them. And we also have a PDF of 36 great tips for online meeting facilitation, because of course, online meetings don't have to be painful. So, thank you all for joining us. I'm going to go back to our workshop slide because I'm hoping that people will be motivated to take a workshop and join us. Thank you all for being here and for your comments, and that's it for now.
That's it for now. We will linger just for another couple of minutes. If anyone has questions, you can go on the phone line, or you can also go on the chat here. I could see that Jean was asking for the link. So you want to go back to the registration page?
Yeah. And Patrick was asking a question about Personify. So if 2 people had Personify, could they present on the screen at the same time? And the answer is yes. So if Lena had a Personify camera, she could actually be up here on the slides with me at the same time. We could be side by side and actually talking to each other. We can't throw anything at each other yet, though, but we'll get
It's coming.
Yeah, the technology is coming.
Good. So thank you all for joining, and let's just see if is there any other questions or any comments?
Yeah, we're going to just hang out for comments and questions just for the next 5 minutes. So great, and Rick gave Jürgen Apollo on Twitter. That's great.
2 with Persona Life in Sococo. That would be nice. Wow, then it would be powerful. You would really be beaming through.
Indeed. Well, and actually Personify is developing hologram technology right now using these cameras. So if you're a Star Trek fan, you've probably seen the 3 poles where you stand inside the 3 poles and the transporter beam can beam you in, and it basically projects your hologram wherever you want it to be. So that is coming by the end of the year. So a set of specs for things like minimum line speeds. I'm going to say, I'm assuming you mean internet bandwidth speeds. I'm going to say 20 megabytes per second is kind of a minimum that you want if you're going to be using video technology. 12 megabytes per, you can get away with 12 megabytes per second, but you're going to want 20 or above, if at all possible.
Okay.
Rick's question, any tips on improving communication when not everybody's English is great? Great question.
I think that's a great question, and it's a very potent one, and it's one that I'm dealing with a lot of my clients because they don't have English as a first language and they're not sharing. They don't have a common language that they're sharing. So I often talk about how a team, as part of the team agreement, can go in and talk about what is global English for us. We're going to use English because it's our working language, but how can we make it global? In that way of not making sure that we're not using inside jokes and we're not using sport metaphors that's very linked to our own country, for example. Also that we're showing that we're slowing down how we're the speed. Like any people who are translating are going to have a lower, just a little bit lower in comprehension of the English language or any language when it's not spoken back to you. And another thing that I think is important is to double up the communication. So if you're on video, that you always, in a team that's global, that you always have written communications as part of it. Because part of when we are in a global team is also that our ears being a little bit on ear gymnastics, because we're going to hear different accents. We might be with our Indian colleagues from Bangalore, but still they have English as their first language or second language, but would have very strong English skills, but they're going to have an accent. The same with my colleagues in Australia. So any way that we can add on our spoken language and have note takers so that we're doubling up our communication. So that's some of those quick tips, but there's different things that a team can also do to make it aware, having a higher awareness around let's make sure our communication is global English.
And using video really helps because reading lips can be very powerful. So that's definitely a trick for if the English isn't great, turn on the video because that will help a lot. Warwick asked a great question that I'd like to address, and he said, what do you think of time activity trackers like Rescue Time, Toggle, Time Cap, do you think they're worthwhile, or do team members think it's spying? I have a very strong opinion on that, which is most people who work remotely are not slacking off. In fact, most people that I've talked to are overworking. They have a hard time turning off. And I think that teams that are over-controlled tend to get over-dependent. And all of these Rescue Time and Toggle and all of these things, keystroke monitoring, screenshot monitoring, it doesn't build trust on the team. So you want to, so if you're worried about people not producing results, then basically going results oriented will really highlight that they're not producing results. And also if you're working out loud, if people know what you're doing, then you know if you're producing and if you're not producing. So really setting very clear expectations and very clear targets for what people need to do. But I'm very much against these monitoring tools only because it doesn't enable trust. And you get weird.
And I would add to that, I'm a little bit in that boat as Lisette, but I think in terms of the tools around working out loud, instead of it being monitored, you are adding, you are contributing and sharing with your colleagues, this is what I did today. Typically when we're remote, it's also because we're in different locations, so there's time zones that plays a part. I'm worked on something during my day, and now I want to pass that on so you know you're working on the same project, or you'll be working on the same project later this week. So by people sharing working out loud tools and apps, and when that's volunteering instead of being monitored, I think that's a very different component.
Yeah, and I just posted iDoneThis.com is a Facebook-style news feed where you can post what you've been working on throughout the day. Really, really lovely tool, and it just helps keep track of what people are doing. So, but really, a lot of managers are afraid that people are going remote because they don't want to actually get the work done, and I found in my interviews that the opposite is true, that people are going remote because they want the freedom, and when they have the freedom, they are emotionally attached to having that freedom, and they'll do whatever it takes to keep that, so they will end up producing results.
Yes.
Indeed. You think it's interesting for self-appraisal, though? Indeed. I've actually used Rescue Time for myself to track my own productivity, just to see if it's to track my own productivity, and I found that actually I was really productive. I wasn't on Facebook as much as I thought I was. So for my own personal self, as a team, to do it for an awareness enhancement of how productive they are and what they're doing online, that I think that those kind of things, that's a great use of those tools. And Jean asked if I have compiled and published my research. Almost. What I'm going to show you now, this is chapter 1. I printed chapter 1 of the book. You can find it online. So it's a very colorful book, as you can see, with lots of pictures. And I have some copies of chapter 1 left, so when you order the book online, I can send you a copy of chapter 1. It's coming very, very soon. It's with the editors right now. So those 100 interviews, the book has been written. It's just being edited right now. So soon, very soon.
So I would add to that also to Eugene, is that on Collaboration Superpowers on the website, all Lisette's all her interviews, or not all of them, many of those interviews are out there, and we also incorporated in the sessions. I use them very much in my online sessions in terms of pre-work and learning partner discussions between sessions, between the virtual sessions when we need. So there's a lot of podcasts out there with the interviews of several of those people that's later going to be in the book when it gets published. So I hope that's helpful to you.
Yeah, all of the interviews are available in video form and in podcast form. So lots of information out there. And if you listen to the 100, you don't need to take the workshop if you listen to all 100 interviews, that's for sure. Because that's where the information came from. But still, the workshop's super fun. I mean, you get to try all the things. You get to, try a virtual office, drive one of the robots, teleport to another country, all the fun things that you get to try out. So I hope that you guys will join us on one of those. And they're super fun. Okay, well, I think that's all the questions for now. We'll let everybody get on with their day. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you online.
We'll see you online. Yes. Thank you. Bye-bye.